Hello and welcome to today's webinar from Emergency Services Times. I'm Catherine Levin and I'm the editor of Emergency Services Times. Today, with our partner NEC Solutions, we'll be looking at the changing way the public is communicating with the emergency services when it's not just a case of using the phone to ring 999 anymore. This webinar is a chat, there's no presentations, no slides, but a valuable conversation that leaves you inspired to find out more. We have a Q&A function on our webinar software. You'll find it on the screen in front of you. You're able to ask us questions. So if you want to pop those in the chat as you go along, try and keep them short. Sometimes when they're very long, it's very hard for me to read them. So just keep them short, then we'll try and get through as many as we can. And you can be part of our conversation. You'll also receive CPD accreditation for the webinar today. We will be sending that to you either directly after the broadcast today, or if you're watching on catch up, you'll get it later in the month. Our plan today is to run for 50 minutes in total. So let's get started. I'll be joined by our panelists on the screen. Great. I'm delighted to introduce Matt Palmer, Alex Finn, and Joe Smith. Matt is Product Director, Public Safety for NEC. Alex is Digital Youth Engagement Lead for the National Police Chiefs Council. And Joe is Head of Mobilising for London Fire Brigade. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
We're going to kick off this discussion today by talking about the strategic context. So what I'd like to do is ask Joe, first of all, to talk a little bit about what a control room looks like today and how the demands have changed, and just to give us a sense of what it's like to be in a major control room in the UK.
Hi, Catherine, thank you. Control room today, and I speak for London Fire Brigade control room, but I'm sure this is replicated across the UK. Vastly different from, say, 20 years ago. I think anyone that has been in a control room that long ago would recognise a real focus on the resources and the services that we provide. So the resourcing, big maps, large screens, knowing our resources. Today, that's flipped on its head. So resourcing and monitoring of those resources is quite a small chunk of what we visualise at the moment. With an outlook of social media, of TV screens and 24-hour news, of sources that provide situational awareness in our area, much more so than a focus on our resources and the systems that we own. So really different.
Yes, and the technology map that NEC is providing to services now, that's changed a lot, presumably, over the years as well, from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, going back to some of the timescales that Joanne described in the past, it was very much around providing solutions, very much kind of around a reactive business model, kind of almost waiting for the calls of the service to come and then to respond appropriately. Whereas now, certainly as, you know, organisations are far more constrained, things like that, there's a lot more proactive monitoring, understanding what's going on to kind of try and help with kind of earlier interventions. And I'm not just talking about control room here, I'm kind of talking about the broader organisational challenges in general, to kind of be more focused and be more proactive, in terms of service delivery.
Yes, okay. And so finishing the kind of strategic position, so Alex, you join us from the National Police Chiefs Council, where you're looking very much at how young people engage with emergency services. What do you see in terms of the way in which they communicate? Are they still picking up the phone and calling 999?
I think that was the first step. I think 999, yes. I think young people are told to call 999 in emergency from quite a young age. And I think, as far as we can tell, that is something that most young people are still familiar with. But it's the non-urgent stuff and the questions that they have. And those areas where, you know, their lives and policing might overlap. And there's a space where the majority of young people spend, you know, 2 to 3 hours on average of their time every day. So, yeah, a real demand for us to be in that space.
Yes, so and in terms of the quality of access, so we're giving people all these different ways of getting into the emergency services, whether that's prevention, protection, responding for information. Do you think that there are drivers from elsewhere? Is there a legislative reason why we need to give everybody these different means of getting to us? Joe, is there what sort of framework are you working with?
So we work closely with BT for that 999 response. But even they're expanding, even they recognise there's a different demand, and that demand comes from young people using social media differently, wanting that instant connection, wanting to be able to chat and seek advice as well. Also, there's e-cars, so we're all driving around in cars that have automatic alarms that will notify us immediately when they crash. So even BT are aware that a next gen 999 and next generation is coming, and we need to be ready for that in our control rooms to be able to respond. Matt is so right, it's changing. We are looking more proactively. We are trying to be there before an emergency happens and respond to that. But we need all those social media feeds. We need all the different situational awareness feeds that we are just really touching the surface of at the moment to be able to do that.
Yes. So one of you mentioned situational awareness just now. Just thinking about in terms of trying to understand where people are calling from. We know of what 3 words, Good Sam, 999i, all these different things are being kind of added into the mix. I just wonder if perhaps, Jo, you could talk a bit about Good Sam. I think that's one of the products that you're using at the Brigade.
We are. That's been really beneficial for us. Not only does Good Sam allow us to capture footage from the emergency, so we can decide, and our control officers decide, what equipment, what resources to send, but also that footage is then sent to our strategic officers that may attend that incident as well. So they have an early insight into what they are attending, rather than just arriving on scene and then dealing with what is in front of them. Good Sam has also allowed us to share footage with our partner agencies. So really embedded in Jessup principles, sharing those with our police colleagues in the Metropolitan Police and London Ambulance Service. So those incidents we're attending together, we are able to provide eyes on from the scene immediately.
Yes. Alex, have you come across that at all in terms of the Digital Youth Project, in terms of them using video to talk to the emergency services in this way?
Not so far with us. I think, again, our audience is very young. I mean, we target sort of 13 to 16-year-olds, but as they get older, they stay with us. So we know they're getting into their sort of 18 to 20s. But primarily, the first thing they're going to do is talk to us, or try to talk to us on social media. That's become really clear, is they wouldn't pick up the phone to call 101, for example, for non-urgent stuff. I think we see it's more when we put ourselves in their space, then they come to us. But I think prior to that, they wouldn't, in lots of cases, even think necessarily to contact us, or necessarily even be aware that they could, or that they're a victim, or from a policing aspect particularly. So I think there is the space we're in is very much upstream. There's an educational and prevention kind of aspect to it. Again, as we're talking about, I think we're there then when it gets further downstream and there is something a bit more urgent. But certainly with young people on social media, that's our sort of space.
Yeah, well, it's where they live, isn't it? I know certainly my children live on social media. So Matt, in terms of the talking to services more broadly, so we've got London here, we've got the NPCC, but broadly, are you finding that video is something that people are talking more about in terms of the need for that to communicate with the public?
Yeah, I mean, video is great in terms of those immediate on-scene eyes of what's going on. You know, there's lots of examples where, certainly as our communities become more diverse and you have language barriers, things like that, there's a lot of examples where bringing that real-time video into the control room to help make that best first decision, has driven a lot of benefits. We talked about Good Sam, other platforms are available. They also can do things like stream real-time location information in as well. So currently, location information comes in on emergency calls. For non-emergency contact, it doesn't. But a lot of contact comes in on non-emergency channels that does require an emergency response, and vice versa as well. So there's a lot of other benefits in addition to the video streaming that these kind of platforms enable.
Yes. So presumably the video allows you to get the situational awareness to understand more about what's actually there. But in terms of location, is that required earlier on in terms of understanding where to send people to? Is that
well,
right?
It certainly helps in terms of where to send resources. Absolutely. Like I said, if it's an emergency call, you do get location information coming through automatically through providers like BT. But given that more contact comes in on non-emergency channels, that location information isn't there automatically. Whereas platforms like Good Sam, like Response Side, for example, they do provide you that real-time location information as well.
Okay, all right. So Joe, there's a question for you here from our viewers this afternoon. It says, what percentage of 999 calls to London Fire Brigade are video enabled? So if you had 100 calls, how many of them would actually involve a video interaction at some point?
We leave it down to our control officers to select that. We may have a range of incidents where we're having multiple calls, so 20 calls received. We only need one or two people to enable that and get some video. And our control officers quite adapt in terms of part of their engagement, their initial engagement. They can relatively ask really quickly if they can send them a video link, and the majority accept that. So I'd probably say at 100 calls, we would probably go for 30 on average.
Okay, well,
it's not.
I'd have thought.
It's just an option for individuals. The majority of our video feeds and where we ask people to send us those recordings are for those more incidents. So someone's trapped, a hand stuck down a siren, animals trapped somewhere. That really enables what equipment we need to send. The public are really great at sending through those things, as long as they can video themselves in that risk.
Okay. Video is used a lot in social media. Think about the use of TikTok in particular. So, Alex, in terms of what young people are doing, you're doing with young people using video to get across the messages, the non-emergency messages, that creating those relationships with policing. What sort of are they doing? Really creative things? How have you been creative in that space?
I think we took a bit of time to look at exactly what was happening there first, and not just kind of wading in doing what we thought we should do. We are, without trying to pretend to be cool and younger than we are trying to use some of the techniques and the content styles to catch attention. That's the main thing. And then obviously the content for us is the start of the engagement. It's the trigger for that engagement. The majority of our work then happens in the comments and the DMs afterwards, and then ultimately to the sort of disclosure end of it when they have something to report as a victim or a witness. But it's very much about us adapting to the space, and not expecting the space to adapt to us.
Yes, that's a good point. So there was a mention of JESIP. I think, Joe, you talked a bit about JESIP. In terms of what you're doing, Matt, in terms of the emergency services wanting to show that ability to work together, to use the same protocols and so forth, do you see that through the sort of technology specs that you're getting for what a control room should look like, a modern one with all these new ways of working? Are they sort of thinking more about their interagency working?
Yeah, I mean, multi-agency working. I mean, that's a whole other kind of discussion in its own right. Some of the challenges around multi-agency. I mean, obviously the key thing and the value for that multi-agency working is the sharing of data. There's the sharing of operational data. It's working collaboratively on the large-scale incidents. Not all agencies are willing to share all of their data with other agencies as well. You then need to start thinking about the GDPR concerns, things like that, privacy, the value of potential intelligence, and things like that. So there are subsets within the data sets where information is willingly shared. There's technology, there's interfaces that have enabled the sharing of information across agencies via electronic means for some time now. So it's about that, but it's also about the agreed operating models. It's about the ways of working and understanding, and being able to audit where that data is going as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gathering lots and lots of data all the time. We're making all these calls. All the times we're communicating with the public, whether it's through social media, through control room and so forth. One of the questions someone's asking here is about HeliMed, which I don't know if you know much about HeliMed. Where has it gone? Somebody's gone from my screen. Oh, there it is. HeliMed services use real-time connections to callers' video by phone with permission. Is this requested by other services when deemed not to put the caller at risk? So I think that suggests that more than one service is using video on the call from different services. Is that a thing, Joe?
For us, no, but I'm sure that there's probably opportunity to explore it. At the moment, we have just started, like I said, sharing with our ambulance service colleagues and our police colleagues, and that is when we are going to an incident where all three of us know we're going to be present, and we're just sharing control room between control room. We do it voice by voice naturally. Now we're going to send some video of the incident down there, And hopefully, like us, they can be a bit more prepared about what they are expecting and the resources they're going to send to scene. So that's the initial stage of it. Right. Can I see where all three of us are connected to a video call, getting information from someone that we all need to attend? Yes, because we ask vastly different information when you speak to fire compared to when you speak to the ambulance service. So, yeah, I can see potential for that.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So you're referring to MATE, aren't you? This multi-agency protocol of where you speak with each other. Does that exist in lots of services now? Is it just a London thing?
Proprietary MATE is so point-to-point connections between services exist to share information data. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
With services.
Right. Okay. So just another question here, Alex, for you. It says, have you found that the young generation sometimes prefer to message rather than talking to a human? And how can we harness that?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely. As a father of two teenage daughters, I can probably count on the fingers of one hand the number of times I've seen them call a friend. It's all text, and so social media completely lends itself to that. They can DM us, they can get sort of straight in touch with us there. How do we harness it? I think the short answer for me is by understanding the value of being in those spaces. So we, as a national sort of platform, we've been going for 6 years, and we're sort of leading the way. I mean, we're 20 years into social media now, and we're only sort of 6 years into running this as a particular sort of focus for young people. But police forces are catching up. I think there are half the police forces have digital desks now, i.e. a dedicated desk in a control room that is monitoring social media and taking reports from social media. But yeah, from my perspective, we should all be there, really, because that's where people are, particularly young people. And then again, as I say, they're young now, but they are getting older. They will become young adults, and they are used to interacting with us in this way. So I think there's a real sort of pressure to understand the value, the business case for being there, and then the public service sort of side of it as well. It's pretty essential, I'd say.
Okay, so all of this creates a situation where there is so much information and so many different channels. Joe, at the beginning, you described your control room, talking about the TV, the big map that you have, and all the electronic map that I've seen when I've been down to visit you, and social media feeds and all this cacophony of information. I think it creates quite a high pressure environment for those working control rooms, and I wonder about their resilience to deal with all of this and how you can process it all. I wonder if, Joe, you could just kind of describe how you help staff deal with all of that. What training you offer, how does it work? Because that's a lot of stuff to take in and deal with.
It is, and I think that's a real change to notice, especially over those 20 years as it's become more and more prolific. So I say we have 6 live feeds that are constantly being updated that we're asking our control officers to keep an eye on, watch, react to, as well as incoming 999 calls. And that is a lot. And I agree with you, Catherine, there's a lot of pressure in control rooms to manage that. We've started right back at recruitment. So our recruitment is vastly different from even 5 years ago in terms of the processes that we ask you to follow, the interview questions that we ask. Again, they're focused around resilience. They're focused about learning and processing information, whereas previous to that, maybe we focused on communication skills or typing skills. So we're really changing right from the beginning, right from our recruitment, to acknowledge that and acknowledge that high pressure environment. And we are feeling the impact on it, like every emergency control room is. We no longer have people that are here for 40, 50 years of their career, much like our control rooms felt in our other services and our partner agencies. They tend to be short-lived now, so turnover, new recruitment is a constant pressure for us.
Right, interesting. So, Matt, what can technology do to help Jo in her control room to deal with all this massive information and relieve some of this pressure? What can it do?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If it's not implemented in a controlled manner, then you are effectively just increasing demand, and you're going to break people. I mean, for me, one of the big advantages of contact via digital channels over a telephone call is with a digital channel, you've got a fully composed message there. You know, with phone calls, you don't know what somebody's going to say until you answer the phone. And solutions typically queue telephone calls based on their priority on the longest waiting calls. When you start looking at digital contact coming in, if you've got calls, if you've got digital channels sat there, digital contact sat there, sorry, those fully composed messages, you can then start actually looking at technology to help you triage those calls and actually look for sentiment, keywords, things like that, and prioritize them so that you are dealing with the most urgent ones in the queue. The other benefit of technology as well, and receiving contact via these digital channels, you can then start thinking about opportunities to do things like self-service and actually empower citizens and provide the fulfillment via the digital channel, so you prevent the phone call coming into the control room in the first place. And that's where, for me, that's where the real opportunities are. We know, speaking to a lot of our customers, particularly police, for example, there's one force that I've spoken to, and 60% of their incoming 101 contact was for follow-up contact for something that had already been reported. So 60% of those calls coming in are, can I have an update on my crime, please? I'd like to speak to my officer in case, for example. So if you can provide that fulfillment via digital channels, then straight away you're significantly reducing the inbound demand coming into your control rooms.
Yes, Alex, you were nodding there when he was talking about when Matt was talking about follow-up calls. And
yeah, I mean, it's not directly our area, but we sit within digital public contact and policing. I know there are trials at the moment with kind of citizen portals. So actually, you know, like you would with a bank or a service provider or some of those, you can go online and you know, you should be able to have an app where you can check this stuff. And I think that is definitely in the pipeline. Again, I'm sure it ties into the piece of work you're talking about, Matt, around the kind of non-urgent failure demand, I think they call it, you know, where these things don't need to be sorted by a call handler or a contact handler. So yeah, there's a lot of work going on there. I think from our perspective, we're doing a bit of that manually, effectively, with young people. We are doing a bit of triaging. We are pushing through the stuff that needs to go to policing, but then referring on to other partners with, you know, we work with, you know, the youth sector, Bernardo's Childline. We're looking to build those digital referral pathways as well, so that it's a sort of a seamless referral on for the young people that come to us.
Interesting. There's a question here around kind of referring to triage, and not. It's saying that whether there should be a real-time ops centre that works in parallel with control rooms, almost like a step before it. Joe, could you see that working? Presumably not in 999, but maybe on non-emergent calls.
I mean, like Matt has suggested, there is something about having those digital platforms that actually get the technology to streamline. So as individuals, as control officers, you're not having to process that yourself until you get to an endpoint. And that really would help us. So that collation of information. In terms of fire service, multiple calls are a big one for us in terms of this very quick demand to speak to the fire brigade. And it's visually important, a fire that's very visible. We can receive 60, 70 calls in the space of 5 minutes. Now, for us, knowing and having a platform that can tell us that they're all coming from the same location, what they're going to report would be ideal and would allow us to be much more effective and efficient. So welcome any sort of technology that can sort of pick out those keywords, those key locations, and feed that in to us.
Interesting. Okay. So there's a question here which is along those lines. So somebody says here that Matt, at the point that you made about, I'm not sure you said AI, but this question is about AI being used as a step too far for the police. So can AI do all of that triage work for you? Does it create problems with the ethics of it, the bias, all the usual things we get with AI? Does it have a role? Is that what you were talking about, artificial intelligence techniques?
I think it does. And you know, we see police forces experimenting with AI now, even voice assistants to kind of provide that fulfillment, but you know, solely via a digital means. Yes, you have to be wary of bias. You know, but the key thing with AI, I mean, there's legislation that's been introduced this year around the use of AI. We ourselves have our own AI ethics panel in terms of when we apply it and use it. I think that the key thing with all of any use of AI across any emergency service application is it shouldn't be viewed as a black box. It should be something where you can explain how it's working, how it's making the determinations that it makes, so that when customers are using it, they fully understand how the AI is kind of making the recommendations that it makes. I mean, certainly what we say at the moment, we view AI very much as a co-pilot. You know, you still need that human decision making. You still need that human check and balance at the very end. But certainly, you know, things like looking at the digital channels when they come in, providing that triage, looking for particular keywords and sentiments, using natural language processing, stuff which is well established and proven in other sectors, to help prioritize those things. You know, I see real value to that, and like I said, it's signposts the demands. You know, you need to make sure that the right contacts getting through to the control rooms, and anything that can be fulfilled via other means is going to be extremely valuable for emergency services.
Yes, and going back to that point about, in fact, a question that's popular here, which is kind of reinforcing what we've already been talking about, which is about, you know, controlling officers are often under significant pressure. How does information being received via multiple channels add to this pressure? And that's effectively what you've described, is that you've got all that pressure, but the technology can relieve some of that. Then Joe's staff are going to have a better shift, I think. Would that be fair, Joe?
I think it would be, and it might feel smoother, seamless, and not so chaotic. You're right. A number of individual different feeds telling you different bits of information. It's very hard to process. We're doing a lot of work with that. AI we are using in our training, so not within the control room, but absolutely for training for our control officers, and a number of fire services have adopted this. So AI as a call taker, so our control officers can practice and respond to different incidents and different demands from the public. So we're definitely embracing the AI. We've not really got to the control room bit yet, but certainly in terms of training. And I suppose having that in there, absolutely, with all those different demands, does ensure that our operators can make those decisions in safe spaces and practice them and get used to that input before they are actually in that live environment. So that works for them too.
Okay. So one of the questions here is around when people are communicating managed services and not using English as a first language, or non-English speakers. It's asking here about how do you cater for that? Is the technology a route to that? I mean, Alex, in terms of your work, has that been an issue around non-English language speaking communication, understanding how policing is in the UK or how young people operate?
It's something that does come up occasionally. I think that we have the luxury of being kind of non-real time. You know, we're on social media, so we're not a contact center, and we're very clear about that. So we have a bit of time. But having spoken to people in contact centers who don't have the time, yeah, there's a clear demand for some technology here. I think, as Matt was saying, I've seen some examples of these co-piloting sort of AI technologies, which are, from a policing perspective, I've seen a really good example which would actually sort of be useful for us as well. It's picking out key things which might come from the police national computer or you know, the sex offenders register. From our perspective, if someone says a name, you know, a young person is talking about a person that they're a bit worried about, it would really be helpful for us to have a little flag up to go, this is something to be cautious about. So there are kind of real benefits, not taking the autonomy away from the operator, but yeah, to tie that technology in, to say, as I think, as well as Joe was saying, just to look at all those different sources without a person having to do it at the same time. So yeah, we've seen some really good sort of case studies of that. I know there are some sort of tests being made, but I think it would yeah, it would definitely, there's scope for us for a bit of sort of AI technology co-piloting there. Yeah.
Joe, what does it look like for you? How many people who are calling you are not having English as a first language? I presume it's quite a high number. London's such a diverse city.
It is, and I don't really solve the problem as much as we'd like. We use a platform, and also we have like the video so Good Sam and the other providers out there, they have a text message service which we can text, and it will convert them into whatever phone language their phone is set. So again, it's something new that we're learning, and we're using that more and more, rather than the proprietary system, which was contacting an agency that then supplied some translators to translate that. That was really slow, and Good Sam provides us with a quick, instant response. But we like to verbally engage with them. It's not just about messages, especially when they're in that emergency situation. We could be giving fire survival guidance to them. We really need visual and voice connection with them, and I don't think we're there yet, and we're always on the lookout for technology that can resolve that.
Okay, so Matt, what does it look like from your perspective in terms of being able to deal with, so we're talking about people who don't have English as first language, but also just a general sort of vulnerability piece. I want us to go on to talk about repeat callers in particular.
The language piece is a real problem, and I know our larger cities, you can have up to 200 different languages being spoken, and the time I've spent in control rooms, a number of examples where it's taken 20 minutes or so for the call handlers to understand what the language is being spoken before they can even contact a translation service. And so you've got a very distressed person ringing 999. They don't know if they're being understood. These are very stressful environments, and so certainly technology exists today which can detect the language that's being spoken and then provide that real-time translation from their language into text, into English text. But what that technology also allows you to do is actually provide reassurance back to the citizen. You can say, I understand what you're saying. Can you please describe the location? Where are you? Can you please describe what's happening? So that communication can then go back to the citizen in their language, and so you can still have that conversation. For those emergency calls, you need to know where I'm sending someone, and you need to know some information about the incident, so you've got a chance to send in the right kind of resources. So that technology is available. That technology is available today, so you can use it for emergency. You can use it for the slower time non-emergency contact too.
Yeah. Okay. And so in that broad sphere of vulnerability and repeat callers, as something we were going to talk about this afternoon as well, about identifying risk and vulnerability from callers, but they're coming in perhaps into fire, into police, into ambulance, into different parts of the emergency service as well. How do you make sense of that and connect that all together? But what can we do with technology or processes to make sure we identify when a repeat call is actually something much more serious, but isn't picked up when it's only seen once by one agency?
It's a really good point. Vulnerable members of the communities will contact all the services. Individual services will have a view of the number of times that person's contacted. Technology allows you today, this person could contact via different means. They could use different telephone numbers. If it's a repeat victim of domestic violence, for example, they might be phoning from a friend's house, a neighbour's house. So technology exists today so that you can understand the totality of the contact for an individual, all the different means they've used. But I still don't think we're there yet in terms of having that holistic view of that one person and their interactions with all of the agencies, because like I said, vulnerable people, they will reach out to all of the services, not just one. The services do talk, and they will share some information, but it's not an automatic thing. It's not something that technology is providing currently.
Yeah. So Joe and Nick and LFB, in terms of repeat callers, how do you know that someone's called you many times? Do you track the phone number or the name, or how does that work?
We do. Our system supports that. So the technology in our system identifies mobile phones, how many times they've called, what type of incident, if we've attended before. So we've got that, and every time they call, there'll be a history of that caller that's presented to our operators to help them make a decision, or help them find out where they were the last contact that they had with us. Matt's right. Then it's slower than we'd like in terms of sharing that. And Catherine, you are so right that if you've called one service, they've probably called every service. So they've probably reached out to our police and ambulance colleagues as well. And we do need to get better at sharing that and putting in some prevention measures as a whole rather than each individual service. MATE, as we talked about before, that multi-agency incident transfer, that's not just for incidents, that's for information about the range of and the type of incidents we go for. That could be of help in the future when that comes in, and that's fully embedded in all our services.
Yes. And so, Alex, how do we integrate in all the social media feeds? Because everything that's kind of, it creates a sort of sound cloud of words, and how do we make sense of that when we kind of bring it into the people calling into control rooms, using social media? How do we integrate that? How do you make sense of all of that?
I think there are some good technology in social media management platforms now, which does collate that, does allow all your operators to work in the same place, allows communication within an organisation. But then, beyond that organisation, it's tricky. The nature of what we're doing is very much engagement based, so we do have these long form conversations. We kind of encourage in some ways that, particularly for vulnerable people, we can talk to them. We can, as I say, hopefully refer them on. But for policing, there is a bit of an issue. I know there is a very fine line between that engagement and then intelligence gathering. That listening. It is very tricky. We're very clear. We are this side of intelligence gathering. We are not gathering intelligence there. We have to be really clear with our audience to build that trust. I mean, that's the line for us, is that line between trust and confidence. They can come to us and talk to us about anything, and what exactly are we recording and sort of talking about across platforms. So that is an ongoing conversation. It's certainly one that we are outside of that space because it's not a concern for us for people to keep coming to us. That's kind of our purpose to some extent.
Okay, all right. So there's a question here which has been quite popular, which is nicely timed for where we are in the conversation, which is around, does the panel envisage a single point of contact for 999 in the future, where police, fire, ambulance, coast guard, to allow them to easily share data between the services? So we talk about that repeat caller who's gone to all of them, and we share it. So you talked a little bit about MATE, Joe. Is there a kind of nirvana when all the data is all shared all in one pot, and we're all accessing it? I don't know, is that technically possible? I mean, I imagine that would be a huge amount of data. Real issues around sharing across borders.
I'll probably have that to see if it's technically possible. And a webinar on its own to discuss whether we should all...
Like a big data lake, swimming around all this data. So what do we think, Matt? Is it going to work?
Well, I mean, multi-agency working, multi-agency contact center and control room operations is something that exists in other parts of the world already. All calls coming in to a single contact center. So, and then those call handlers then decide what is the appropriate resolution to that call. It could be a single agency response. It could be a multi-agency response. That the technology is there to do that, and we do see that working already in other parts of the world.
Okay, so I imagine in the UK we've got 44 fire services in England. We've got 43 police forces. I just cannot imagine a time when it's all brought together. Politics.
No, but police and fire do tend to operate within the same geographic regions. It could happen technologically. It could happen.
Yeah,
for sure.
Maybe we should do it in London first, Joe. You could do it all in London to start with, and we'll see how that goes.
We have I think overall, Archie, I'll speak for my colleagues in charge of their control rooms as well. Absolutely, our aim is to deliver the best service and the quickest service to the public. We have talked about in the past having decision makers in terms of responding to incidents all in one room, the ability to share. That often happens at events. So when we have pre-planned events, those Notting Hill carnivals, those New Year's Eve, all emergency services are in the same room, sharing those visuals, being able to, because we're responding as a team together. So we do it on a lot. But then I think we go back to being the comfortable single service organisations that we are. But there is to explore that further.
Okay. All right, it's good. Well, it's good to have some ambitions for the future, some changes that we can see across the services. We'll come back in 5 years and see if that's changed. We have rattled through very nicely all our topics that we were going to talk about this afternoon. I want to just ask you all now, as we kind of draw to time for the end of the webinar, about the piece of advice that you'd like people to go about. So we've covered quite a few different things around that strategic context, around the sort of using geographical information, video, how you deal with the mass information, how you create resilient control rooms, the repeat callers vulnerability. We've covered a whole range of things. But if you wanted people to go back now and talk in organisations about one thing from this webinar, what piece of advice would you ask them to consider? So I'll start with you, Jo. What would you like them to think about?
I think for us and for Fire, we have opportunities because our demand is less than our other emergency services in terms of that. So we have opportunities to get it right first time, and in terms of how we communicate digitally, how that looks like in terms of responding back to people that want to know the result of incidents. So that posting on social media as an update. Yeah. We have that ability to get that right as we start introducing it, because of our demand. So really, yeah. What would people like to see from that, and how would you like to engage with a fire service in the future? Traditionally, we are just seen to go to those real emergency, those fires and RTCs and those rescues. But we're that, and we have a bigger scope than that. And whether that's contacting us by social media, whether that's hearing updates about incidents, whether that's us being able to post immediately that there's a large fire, so you don't need to ring us. How does that look to Londoners to respond to us?
Yes. Okay, great. So something for Londoners on the call today to think about. Alex, what piece of advice do you have for our viewers today?
I think my kind of one of my guiding missions, just in policing itself, let alone across the services, is to try and avoid that replication across 43 different police forces as much as possible. There is a case to be made for a bit of centralisation, at least in best practice and a framework of what works, and then there's an opportunity for sort of local versions of that, but with a kind of a central guide, a subject matter expert, a best practice from the middle.
Yes, we do see that a lot with services, that they do the same thing over and over and over. So yes, good stuff. Matt, what's your piece of advice?
I think my advice will be around the introduction of channel shift into operations. I think my advice would be you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of good examples of best practice in other industry sectors. Learn from their mistakes. And when you're looking at incorporating it into your own business, understand your business processes, understand your workflows, and kind of start small, I would say. So start with understand the types of inquiries that you get. Start with the lines of inquiries which have quite a straightforward resolution path. Start small, prototype, run through the concept, and then build out from there. Don't try and eat the elephant in one go, would be my advice.
One of my favourite metaphors, elephants and being eaten. Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. Excellent. So we are out of time, unfortunately. Just leaves me to thank you all, three of you, for joining me this afternoon to talk about how communication looks in emergency services now and into the future. And I think you've given us lots to think about. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'm going to just finish us off here, so you will disappear off my screen. Just leaves me to say that this webinar will be available on catch up via our website, so you can watch that at your leisure again if you want to, or share it with somebody else, and you'll receive your CPD accreditation in due course. Our next webinar is on the 21st of November, where we'll be looking at the topic of apprenticeships and what a change in government means in terms of how that looks for the emergency services. Do visit our website on emergencyservicestimes.com and sign up for our weekly or daily digest to stay up to date. There is plenty going on in the sector right now. Just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching.